It's rare you get an enemy so powerful that it takes 3 Primarchs and their legions to handle them. Here during the Great Crusade, as allies before the heresy, 3 Primarchs face a planet of Xenos under the control of a hovering tentacled mind controller. What happened to the people of the planet? Let's begin. The compliance of a world that had once been a beacon of civilization was to be a crowning glory to an otherwise fruitless expedition, and so the Primarchs of all 3 legions, the Sons of Horus, the Death Guard, and the White Scars, determined to deliver the imperial truth on the planet in person. 3 entire legions made planetfall as one, but what transpired when they came to stand before the gate of the world's capital was quite unprecedented in the decades of the Great Crusade. Those gates remained barred, and no reaction to the amassing of 3 legions before them was forthcoming. His choler rising, Horus raised his mace as to strike the mighty gates, but before he could do so, a word of caution rung out from the throng of councillors and attendants. The warning had been voiced by Kulek Sen, a senior stormseer of the White Scars. The shadow hangs over this place, the shadow of domination. Only death will sever the strings. Mortarion counselled Horus to press onwards, discounting the Stormseer's warning, and press onwards Horus did, striking the gates such a resounding blow that his mace that it caused them to buckle inwards and collapse with a billowing cloud of dust. Advancing within the city, a great mass of humanity pressed in on every quarter. The eyes of the occupants were unfocused and vacant, every mouth slack and drooling. Everybody was unwashed and stinking and clad in shredded rags, as if the wearer had been given no thought to their own bodily well-being for many months, perhaps even years. Once more, Kulek Sen offered his master his warning as the party moved through the streets, this time with the increased concern they felt. Once more, Mortarion heard and sneered his derision of the Psyker arts. But this time the Great Khan interjected, insisting that his brother Horus heed the Stormseer's words. This time Horus did so. Whatever it was the Stormseer had detected an echo before the gates was now evident for all to see. In the heavens above, a churning vortex of unnatural energies was forming, its eye directly above the centre of the city. Etheric gusts caught the Primarchs' personal banners, and the amassed bodies finally stirred, a deep sonorous groan voiced simultaneously from 100,000 throats. Fighting their way clear, the Primarchs reunited with their Gene Sons outside of the city, and in council with the Great Khan's Stormseers, they determined that the entire world was under some manner of Xenos domination, one born not of physical reality, but of the other world, the other realm, the warp. Worse still, they counselled that this domination was being exerted upon the human population of Droon via a series of extra-dimensional portals, each centred upon one of the major mesotop cities. Only by closing these portals, the Stormseers claimed, could the enslavement of Droon be ended. And so, the war to deliver Droon from the yoke of alien domination began. Jagatai Khan was nominated by Horus as campaign commander. Such a thing was rare indeed, for even though the Emperor's Gene Sons fought beneath the same banner and the sundering of their ranks was still decades away, there existed a deep-seated rivalry between many. The wisdom of Lupercal's decision was plain to see, but the Primarch of the Death Guard Legion protested it nonetheless, for Mortarion detested the employment of Psykers in any form, for any reason, and against any foe. Thus the Death Guard served in the Droon campaign only nominally under the Great Khan's leadership. Mortarion ensured they remained apart from the other 2 legions. The war would rage for almost 6 Terran months, the Great Khan utilising each element of his command as best suited to its nature. Jagatai's own legion ranged far and wide across the wastes of Droon, striking at concentrations of Xenos power identified by his Stormseers. They encountered a range of horrifying creatures of barely definable form. They all had in common bloated bodies that floated on invisible etheric tides, multiple eyes, thrashing tendrils, and the ability to unleash fearsome blasts of warp energy, even as they directed wave after wave of subhuman mind slaves at the legionaries. The Stormseers proved crucial, not just in locating these abominable foes, but in combating them on the field of battle too, for they were able to deaden the psychic domination effects and thus allow their other legionaries to re-engage the Xenos puppet masters and defeat them, albeit not without losses. At the last, the campaign reached its climax, where it had begun, at the Mesotop city, where the three Primarchs had first encountered the Xenos dominators. The closer to the heart of the city the Primarchs advanced, the more potent the psionic waves assaulting them grew, and the more massive and hideous the Xenos abominations they encountered. Though a potent force indeed, none can say what harm might have befallen the Primarchs had the White Scar Stormseers not been close at hand to repel the worst of the aliens' psychic counter-assaults. The air itself screamed in torture, and the very stuff of reality was stretched to breaking point, the own light of the warp glimmering through a million cracks and rents. Jagatai, Horus, and Mortarion knew that they had reached the centre of the Xenos incursion, where even they could proceed no longer. So powerful were the psionic tides flooded out from the hideously pulsating wound in reality. At the very centre of the city, overhead loomed an archway of quivering, still living flesh of what must surely have once been a man. Beneath the archway was a void pulsing with the raw power of the warp, and from it was emerging a vast and bloated form, a distended central sac replete with thrashing pseudopods and dozens of two gnawing eyes. Voicing an ancient Tregorian curse, the great Khan swore the behemoth would not establish dominion in his gene-father's realm, and in answer his brothers took their place on either side, while what remained of his depleted Stormseers council formed a loose ring all about, every iota of their power bent to the task of warding off the behemoth's vile kin. Scholars of war might ponder what force might test the power, not just of one, but of three of the Emperor's gene sons, and in the contest that ensued they might find one such possible answer. The behemoth brought to bear an array of weaponry, from whipping diamond-sharp tendrils to the unrelenting power of its utterly alien will. The Stormseers lay dead upon the ground, in as many seconds, their minds torn apart by the behemoth's battering ram of psionic dominators. 10 Stormseers less to protect the Primarchs. And the Primarchs were thus sorely tested, for while such as they could scarcely know fear, each soon brought a dozen and more hurts. Even the mighty Horus felt the behemoth's mental whip, and though he repelled its will, the effort left blood gushing from his eyes in crimson rivers. Mortarion was struggling as well against his vile foe, and whilst his scythe cut through its thrashing tentacles by the dozen, it strove to gain domination over his mind and to become master of his flesh. As with Horus, the behemoth was unable to batter down Mortarion's defences, but resisting it drove the Deathlord to his very knees. It was Jagatai who at the last put an end to the Xenos beast. By the combined efforts of his last remaining Stormseers, the Great Khan was rendered unseen to the behemoth, so that even as it concentrated its assault upon Horus and Mortarion, Jagatai was able to work his way around the creature's vast bloated form, and thereby locate a weak point upon its underside. There are those of our order who have indulged themselves with fanciful thoughts of how different latter ages might be had. Only Jagatai stayed his final strike, but delayed it long enough for the behemoth to press its assault upon his brothers. Such ponderings are of course futile, and they ignore his essential nature. Jagatai thrust upward, spearing some essential node of organ in the behemoth's central mass. It died upon his blade, but the explosion of etheric force unleashed was very nearly his end too. It was Horus who saved Jagatai from being sucked into the now collapsing vortex, Lupercal hauling his brother clear, and thus was the emancipation of Druun achieved, though not a single one of the world's populace would benefit from the defeat of their alien masters. With the behemoths slain and the portals through which the aliens had exerted their dominance sealed, hundreds of millions of meat puppets collapsed wherever they were standing, never to rise again. In truth, such a fate was a mercy for the people of Druun and for the Imperium. For one way or another, they could not have been allowed to live. And if you like this video, check out this other one.